Hello everyone, my name is Elvin Wilson. I'm the prep manager at the original Pancake House here in South Carolina, and I am back with another video. Yeah, I had a lot of experience as a cook working at the original Pancake House. 12 consecutive years as a cook. When I first started for the company, I started in utility, washing dishes. Um, I was hired by the first general manager to ever work for the company, and his name was James Jordan. James Jordan used to date my mother. I was about 15, going on 16 years old, and she asked him, was it possible that I could get a job, working with him at the original Pancake House. And he asked, well, how old is he? Well, he's 15, but he'll be 16 in a few months. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. I will say this, James Jordan, I found out later where he got his training from. He got his training from Portland, and he was good. He knew his stuff. He was really, really good, and he was a really, really nice man. And I was very fortunate that he met my moms, because they did some work together. He used to manage a restaurant called Birds in West Columbia, and he met my moms, and that was a good thing for me. And he liked my moms a lot, and they were dating and going out. And I will say this, my mom, she's Puerto Rican, and she's a Puerto Rican doll baby. So that was a good thing for me. And everything happens for a reason, because she talked to James Jordan, which was the very first manager to work at the original Pancake House in South Carolina, got his training from Portland. Kathy and Marguerite sent him to Portland for his training before becoming the general manager at the original Pancake House in South Carolina. So I was able to come on. I was able to come on as a utility for a short time. I did that for about 2 years, 2.5 years. I always say 3 years when people ask me, but it's about 2.5 years before finally becoming a cook at the original Pancake House. While I was in the utility and washing dishes, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun for me, just having a job, for the first time, and not quite being 16 years old yet. I was 15. I was going to high school. That means I was working on weekends and then picking up holidays during the week. Holidays or days that we didn't have school would be, busy days for the original Pancake House. So I would be put on the schedules to work those days, and that was great. I loved it. I was able to get a couple friends on that I went to school with. That made it even more fun, because they hung in there. I got them the job at the original Pancake House. I was able to, get them up there and get them the job, and we were friends all through high school, and that made the job even more fun. And then I met Kathy and Marguerite's mother. Her name was Joanne, and she was such a nice lady. Such a nice lady. God bless her soul. She was such a nice lady. And she liked me so much. She really, really liked me a lot. And I liked her too. And I can remember every time I came to work at the original Pancake House, and I would look at her and she would look at me, and I would smile and she would smile. And that made me feel like I was going to have a good day, no matter what she had to deal with. Dealing with me at the age of 15, 16 at the original Pancake House, it was quite a challenge. It was, a challenge for James Jordan, because he wanted me to be successful. A challenge for Miss Joanne, Kathy and Marguerite's mom, because I worked hard, and she saw that, and she liked it. But again, I'm 16 years old, so a 16-year-old is going to be a 16-year-old. A 60-year-old is going to be a 16-year-old. So, she would always have to come to me and, Elvin, can you keep it down a little bit? Because for some reason, You know, maybe I was just excited, you know, or, you know, maybe I had too many pancakes that morning, but I would always be talking very loud to the point where you can hear me throughout the restaurant. I'd be in the back working, and I would start out. I wouldn't start out that way in the very beginning. Everything be calm, but as the business starts to open, we start to do a little business. You know what I mean? Things get a little busy. You know, my voice gets louder. Miss Joanne will have to come around there and ask me to keep it down a little bit. You know, but she would smile about it because she liked me. You know, she's like, Elvin, you know, just keep it down. You're doing good. Just keep it down. You know? And she would have to do that periodically throughout the day, every day, when I worked at the original Pancake House. She was there, I would say every 45 minutes to an hour, she would have to come. You know, I needed that attention from her. If I didn't get it, you know, my voice would get louder to the point where you would hear me all the way out throughout the whole restaurant. And God bless her heart. She really, really, really is a nice woman, and I will never forget working with Miss Joanne at the original Pancake House. Yes, I miss her. I miss her so much. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. But while I'm working in utility, whether it be busing or washing dishes or whatever I was doing, you can see the cook line from where I was working at, you know. And I would always look over there and see the system they had set up, and the way James Jordan had it set up, the way he was trained in Portland to have the line and how organized he was, and the way they had it set up on the line was just, it was so unique. It was so special, and you can tell that he was doing it right, you know. And Kathy and Marguerite were there, and they would be there to oversee it, to make sure it was being done right, and it was, you know, because they spent very little time. I didn't see them that much. They were there at the restaurant, but they spent very little time actually having to physically manage, unless James Jordan was off. If he was off that day, then, you know, they would cover his days off. Kathy would spend most of her time working in the kitchen area if need be, but most of the time the line would be staffed pretty well. If James Jordan wasn't there, the line would be staffed well, to the point where, you know, if she had to come up there, it was a, you know, dire need, or, you know, there was an emergency or something. But she was experienced, and she was very knowledgeable in the kitchen and working in the kitchen. So Kathy would handle that part. Marguerite would handle the front of the house with the servers, maybe even possibly waiting tables if need be, handling the register, those types of things, working the front of the house, while Kathy would manage the back of the house when James Jordan wasn't there. When James was there, they spent very little time doing that. James Jordan was the kitchen manager. He was the general manager. He was the only manager at that time. When the restaurant first opened, yeah, he did it all. You know, and he was there from open to close, 7 days a week. During that time, we were open from Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, Sunday would be 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And he was there from open to close. Those, you know, those shifts, whenever, or whatever days he had off. You know, if he wasn't off, yeah, he was there from open to close. Yeah. But I would always look over there on the cook line and see that system they had, and it was great. It was great. The cooks had their own side prep, the prep that they did, you know, whether it be cracking eggs, and they used to crack eggs in a stainless steel bowl, and they would crack 36 eggs in a bowl for the next day. So there might be, depending on what day it is, if you're going into a Tuesday or Wednesday, it might be six bowls with 36 eggs cracked in each bowl. And I'll never forget that, because whoever was working on the egg side, if they needed 36s, the guy that was working the 4-foot would go into the cooler, which was very close to the cook line. It was so convenient. When we had the original Pancake House on Beltline, before we moved to the Forest Drive location, the original location was on Beltline, where J.R. Cash is right now. And that's where we used to be. And that location was great, because the kitchen it was very spacious. You know, you can walk in, you can walk out of the kitchen. You know, it wasn't a one way in, one way out type thing. You know, it was very, we had plenty of space. And I liked that. And there was a cooler right next to the cook line, which was convenient, for everyone. And they would crack those eggs, 36 eggs, in a stainless steel bowl and cover them up, and they would have them stored in the cooler. And the guy working the 4-foot station, if the egg guy needed some eggs, we was working eggs, he would holler, I need 2 36s. And then the guy from the 4-foot would go in, grab 2 bowls, bring it up there, and then they would put the bowls in a egg container and then blend them to get them ready for whatever they needed them for, whether it be omelets or scrambled eggs or whatever they needed them for. But the system was absolutely brilliant and by the book. I'll never forget that. Everything that they cooked, from the apples and the Dutch babies, the ovens were, at the time, I want to say brand spanking new. The restaurant had only been open for a year, about a year. And yeah, everything up there was brand new. I mean, you can look in the oven, see an apple or a Dutch baby cooking, and you wouldn't have to open the oven up to look at it, because you can see through to what's being cooked inside the oven, and there were lights on, and that made it better. That made it a better quality product, because there was no air getting in there. So because there was no air getting in there, the food was cooking at its proper temperature, and you would get maximum height on apples and Dutch babies. I mean, it got to the point where when I finally became a prep cook, I was trying to figure out why my apples and Dutches weren't the same as James Jordan and when he worked there. And I always said that when I became prep cook, I'm like, why don't my apples and Dutches look like his used to look? And it wasn't anything I was doing wrong. It wasn't anything that I was doing wrong at all. It was just the ovens, Over time, you get normal wear and tear to the point where, they don't close properly, air gets in there, so it's not holding the proper temperature that it should be holding to cook an apple or a Dutch baby. And yeah, after that, what are you gonna do? You just can't keep buying brand new ovens. You have to work with what you have, and that's what we've been doing. So every now and then, you get that one apple and that one Dutch baby that was able to be in the oven, where the cook didn't have to constantly open and close the oven door, and you would get that maximum height on apples and Dutches, and it looked great. But I remember back when I was a utility person, I used to see some of those apples and Dutch babies go out. I mean, the apples and the Dutch babies were humongous, and they were beautiful. Cinnamon glaze over top of the apple pancake. It was so great. And the apples were so massive and looked so nice that some of the wait staff and the servers were, had to be extra careful when they were taking them bad boys out of the window. You had some servers who were afraid to take them out of the window. They were that beautiful, because that cinnamon was so hot. If it touches your skin, it will burn you. So you have to be really careful. And I understand that, but they were so massive during that time that, yeah, I'd see a server sometimes, they be hesitant to grab the plate just to get them bad boys out of there. But they wanted to get to the customer so the customer can see what was presented, the presentation. So, and everyone had a great sense of urgency when the store first opened, about the first year. Everyone had a sense of urgency. And at the time, the restaurant wasn't doing nearly the business that it's doing today, but we were staffed for the business that we were doing. So, for example, we might run 7 cooks or more on the weekends, whereas, at the original Pancake House in 1992, if we had 2 cooks during the week, that was enough. On Friday, maybe 3. Saturday and Sunday, we had 1 cook at every station, and that was enough. You had 1 cook at every station, and then you had James Jordan, who was the overseer. He was the general manager. So if it got hectic or it got really, really busy, he can hop back there and help us get it done. Expedite, call a wheel, help us get the food out. And I saw that happen a lot. And the system was so great. I was washing the dishes, and I would look over there, and I would tell James at the end of the day, I had fun. And I like that. You know, he's like, yeah, maybe one day, I was like, yeah, maybe one day real soon. Maybe one day real soon. You know. And that day came. Yeah. That day came for me, and I was given an opportunity to start as a cook part-time at the original Pancake House. After working utility for about 2.5 years. My other friends didn't want to bother with it. They saw it. They was like, And they were kind of already in their comfort zone, just doing what they were doing, and it was all right. They didn't have to do it. But me, I liked it. I liked it. I liked everything about it. Everything from the prep guy. His name was William Moore. He was the very first prep cook to work at the original Pancake House in South Carolina. His name was William Moore, and he was great. And him and James, they were really, really good friends. They knew each other real well, and they got along real well. And William was really good. William was really good. I want to say that a lot of my training came from just watching him. Because the day I became prep cook at the original Pancake House, Kathy and Marguerite got into a situation where they didn't know who they were going to put back there. It was like, goodness gracious, and they had already went through several prep cooks, and William Moore had already retired, and they were hiring several prep cooks, but it got to a point where, they didn't know what they were going to do, and the position was open. And I said, Marguerite, I could do this. And they said, well, but they knew that taking me away from the cook line was going to cause some problems, but at the same time, what were they going to do? I had been working for the company for a long time. I had cooked for 12 years. Before going to her and telling her what I told her, I was like, Marguerite, Kathy, I could do this. Give me a shot, give me a chance. They did exactly that, because to cover the position, all they did was hand me the book, the prep book, and they walked away. It was like, oh, that's that. Elvin's been watching it for 12 years. We know he can read, so yeah, let him go. And that was my training. They handed me the book and walked off. There was so much stuff going on during the time. There was no time. There was nobody to train me. There was just no one to do it. Yeah, they handed me the book and walked away. And I did fine. I even remember the manager that was there during the time. He came to me and went to Kathy and Marguerite and said, Elvin makes some really, really good quiche. Yeah. He's like, I want to say that Elvin's quiche is better than William Moore's quiche. And I'll never forget the day that when they first put me back there, they wasn't sure whether or not they were going to let me do it full time or not. But then that manager came back to me and he said, Elvin, I got good news for you. I got with Kathy and Marguerite. They like the job you're doing. The preposition, it's yours. It's yours. Yeah. That made me feel happy. And I've been doing it ever since. But working as a cook at the original Pancake House for 12 years, oh, what fun that was. It was so much fun. It was great. Everything from the timing, everything that James Jordan learned in Portland, he passed it on. And the only people that really benefited from his training were the ones that were paying attention. And I was paying attention because I wanted to be just as good as he was, which during the time I never got that good because he was really good. He was good. He had a good sense of urgency. He was firm but nice at the same time. And we'll talk about it because James had a lot of strategies. A lot of strategies that I'll never forget. Strategies that were so good right now to this day. If I take him to my general manager, he's like, I don't know if we can make that happen, Elvin. There's a lot of things because I remembered everything. So I'll go to my general manager and be like, hey, man, this is something we might want to consider. maybe we should start floating these apples and Dutch babies. You know, I think it'd be a good idea for the company. You know, a lot of times you get these tables and they want to take 10% off or 15% off because something wasn't right. You know, or they've been waiting too long for their food. But you got to think about it. You know, when you have an item like an apple pancake or a Dutch baby, which is a signature item at the original Pancake House in South Carolina, you can potentially save a table just by floating them, just by having them ready at all times. You'll bring something out there to a table where they've been waiting for a while, and you give them something to snack on because they got to wait a few, like maybe 10 or 12 or 15 extra minutes, and you put something on their table like an apple pancake and a Dutch baby. You know, if you were to put something like that on my table, even though I had been waiting 20 minutes and then now I know my food's not going to be up for another 10, 12, 15 minutes, but you give me something like that, something like a Dutch baby, and we'll talk more about that because the Dutch babies are great. They remind me of the elephant ear at the fair. That's what they remind me of. You know, I think they're great. I love the Dutch baby at the original Pancake House. And yeah, we'll talk more about that, but yeah, to present something like that to a customer that's been waiting a while, they've been already on a wait to get in, to get seated, and then they got to wait another 20 minutes, and then the food's running behind, and you do something like that, you know, the last thing they're going to do is say, well, you know, we didn't really like our, you know, we wasn't really pleased, and then you want to give them a discount, or, you know, you save that money by, you know, putting something amazing like an apple pancake or a Dutch baby on that customer's table to let them know we apologize for the wait, but here's something for you to enjoy while you're here. You know? And it works. It works. I bring it to my general manager all the time, and it's just tough because the system that we have set up now is not the same as it was back in 1992. Will we ever get back to that? I hope so, because I'm constantly talking to the management team about it, letting them know how things used to be. You know, things are much different now, you know, than they were. Things are much different now in 2026 as it was in 1992. I get it, because we're doing a whole lot more business. So it's a whole, but if we're staffed for it, then we should still be able to accomplish it, you know. Yeah, we just gotta believe that these things are possible and we can make them happen. And I'm always looking for ways to impress customers when they come in. You know, I'm always looking for ways to make them happy when they come to visit at the original Pancake House. So know that I'm talking to management, you know, and I'm looking to make your stay at the original Pancake House when you come visit the best that it can possibly be. So, with that, we'll save it for another episode, and I'll tell you more about my adventures as a cook at the original Pancake House. This is just the beginning. You know, 12 years, 12 long years, 12 fun years. It wasn't as long as, you know, 12 years seems like a long time, but, you know, when you're enjoying yourself and you're having fun, it had its challenges. It really did. It had its challenges. You know, I can't lie, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And I have a lot to talk about, you know, being a cook at the original Pancake House. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to share. So, yeah. We'll continue it in another video. Yeah. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.